I first felt the shift when our new culture director, Madison, made me sit through a 3-hour meeting in Phoenix about celebrating workplace joy. Some guy in a company-branded hoodie passed out gluten-free muffins while we chanted, "We rise together." Meanwhile, I was still tracking a memory leak that had been quietly corrupting warehouse batch logs for 6 straight weeks. What did our system need? Clean code and a couple more gigs of RAM. Not joy. But the moment I knew I was officially irrevocably done, I walked into my cube on a Monday morning and found a handwritten note calligraphy, even taped to my screen, from Madison. It read, "Your silence is disrupting team harmony." My silence. "Lady, I'm 54. I built the back end that moves 90,000 units a week without even blinking. The same back end that your paycheck flows through. Every silent function I wrote has more reliability than your espresso machine. But sure, let's worry about why I don't wear matching t-shirts on Trust Fall Fridays. And before we go any further, if you're one of the 97% who binge these stories without subscribing, now's your chance. It helps this channel keep going, and trust me, what's coming? You'll want front row seats. Anyway, Madison came from one of those pastel-colored West Coast startups where job titles included Chief Empathy Officer and Vibe Specialist. She didn't understand that this company didn't need incense and wellness walls. It needed infrastructure. It needed me. My role wasn't to clap at all hands meetings. It was to keep Haven, the logistics algorithm I designed, running with military-grade precision. Hung over warehouse worker, double-billed supplier invoice. Haven caught, it corrected it, and rerouted it without ceremony. But all Madison saw was a woman in her 50s who didn't decorate her cubicle and skipped the Friday mixers. To her, I was an obstacle to her radical connectivity. She got subtle. Suddenly, our performance reviews included phrases like emotional contribution and desk positivity. Check-ins turned into pastel interrogation sessions with scones. Then one day, microwave busted. I overheard her in the cafeteria saying, "We've got too many legacy systems and legacy minds. You can't build the future on dry code and cold personalities." That's when I knew I was the cold personality. And she had a plan to replace me. They sent Miguel, who used to run logistics, blindfolded to a week-long prospective alignment retreat in Sedona. He came back like someone had replaced his spine with a rolled-up yoga mat. They were softening up the veterans, one kumbaya at a time. So I started preparing. Quietly, carefully, the way I always had. I didn't storm into a town hall. I didn't beg to be understood. I just updated a few lines of code. Haven was built to be resilient, but also to survive the worst-case scenario, a leadership team drunk on pastel values trying to rip out its architect without a handoff. I didn't decorate my desk, sure, but I knew how to build a ghost that bites when forgotten. Then came the glitter bomb. My performance packet hit my inbox with animated headers and watercolor gradients. Page 1 featured a harmony spectrum of cartoon smiley faces from Radiant Unicorn to Energy Needs Replenishing. Page 2 had a cursive quote from Madison, "We rise by lifting others and ourselves through radical kindness." Page 3 asked me to reflect on how your emotional tone contributes to team warmth. I printed it out just so I could throw it in the trash by hand. Next thing I knew, I was booked into a mandatory Zoom session, 2-on-1. Madison and someone from HR named Kyle, whose personality consisted of head nods and saying that totally resonates. Madison leaned in like a therapist auditioning for a TED Talk. "Carol," she said, "we've noticed a pattern. You tend to be, how do I say this, emotionally unavailable in cross-functional settings." I responded calmly, "I write back-end infrastructure. I'm supposed to be unavailable." She blinked. Kyle nodded like a dashboard bobblehead. "They told me I needed to attend a collaborative empathy lab. They said my lack of eye contact was passive-aggressive. They said replying 'noted' on Slack felt cold. What they didn't say was that Haven had flawlessly handled 2.3 million transactions this quarter without a single miss, while Madison was still figuring out how to change fonts in Google Slides. But feelings were currency now, and apparently mine didn't meet quota. Meanwhile, Haven kept humming like a Swiss vault. Quiet. Perfect. And last Tuesday, it flagged something unusual deep in the vendor payout logs. Something manual, something masked. And that's when everything began to shift. Deep in the vendor payout logs, Haven flagged a duplicate invoice tagged with a code I hadn't seen before: gluten-free. A manual approval. That wasn't unusual, people misclick. But this override wasn't from finance. Not procurement either. No. This came from someone in the C-suite. And the timestamp 17 minutes before Madison's "Welcome to the Future" email lit up the all-staff channel. That got my attention. I started digging. Couldn't help myself. Haven had already attached a quiet audit trail like a bloodhound dropping a dead squirrel at my feet. The override originated from the executive floor shortly after a compliance check failed. I didn't know what gluten-free meant yet, but my gut clenched like a vice. Then came Tuesday morning, team stand-up. Madison was in full Pinterest profit mode, preaching about radical vulnerability as a performance indicator. I sat quiet, still thinking about that log file glowing on my second screen. Then she turned to me, loud enough for the interns to flinch. "Carol, could you model a little more collaboration today? Your energy feels very withholding." I looked up. Dead center of the room, every eye flicked toward me, some curious, some pitying. My face didn't move, but something inside me clicked. Like the first notch of a combination lock sliding into place. I didn't respond. Didn't have to. The damage wasn't to me, it was to her illusion of control. She thought she'd put me in my place. But in that moment, I wasn't humiliated. I was activated. I returned to my desk and began quietly pruning Haven's runtime protocols. Not deleting, not sabotaging, just preparing. Preparing Haven for what to do if its architect vanished. And more importantly, who to tell. 2 hours later, a calendar invite arrived. Staffing realignment discussion. No subject bold enough to admit what it really was. Just a warm beige block slotted between smoothie hour and Q3 laughter yoga. I clicked, except knowing I'd be the only one walking out without a job. They handed me a 12-page packet full of corporate fluff, and "We thank you for your service," legalese. Madison smiled like she was offering me a discount to a soul retreat. Kyle read from a script, his voice cracking. "There's been a strategic decision to restructure your department's workflow layers." He couldn't even say "fired." But I wasn't broken. I was already rebuilding. I asked, "How many people are being restructured?" Madison hesitated just enough to show it wasn't rehearsed. At this moment, "Just you." I nodded. No flinch, no grand exit. I picked up the pen and signed. Black ink on white paper. But it may as well have been blood on snow. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Haven had been quietly watching me too. Not in a creepy, sentient AI way. More like a safety net built by someone who'd learned not to trust executive intentions. I had buried the Trigger 5 protocol layers deep. If my credentials were deactivated without a proper succession handoff, Haven would enter a silent 24-hour countdown. No alerts, no fireworks, just a timer ticking quietly beneath the system's heartbeat. At midnight the next day, Haven would go dark. No backups, no clone services. I made damn sure of that. You see, Haven wasn't just software. It was the brainstem of our logistics ecosystem. A nervous system pulsing through inventory, billing, shipping, supplier response. Every override, every priority shift, every balance correction, all routed through its core. And it depended on me. The dev team never questioned the magic. Why would they? It worked better than anything they'd ever seen. Haven didn't just track flow. It predicted failure. It course-corrected for weather disruptions, cross-border customs, slowdowns, even driver PTO. It was black magic wrapped in clean code. And now they were about to find out what happened when you pulled the architect's plug. I also left them a gift, a bomb disguised as a bouquet. Months ago, I scheduled a final report to deploy, only if my credentials were removed without succession logs in place. A simple document, a summary of every compliance irregularity Haven had flagged over the last 18 months, including the one manually overridden by someone on the executive floor. Subject line: System integrity. Exception initiated by user absence. Recipient, not Madison. Not Kyle. The board of directors. After signing, I handed the packet to Kyle, stood, and held out my badge. Madison reached for it like a trophy, like she'd finally erased a problem in her pastel pipeline. I let it go and said I hope the team finds the warmth they're looking for. She smiled, clueless. I think we all will now. The elevator doors closed. Only then did I breathe. Not relief, reset. Outside, the sky looked sharper. Freedom, I realized, was cold, clean, and just quiet enough to rebuild. I didn't text the few coworkers I still trusted. I just walked home, poured a glass of boxed wine, sat down at my old terminal, and opened the Haven dashboard for the last time. Watched it glide through 47,000 back-end tasks in under 90 seconds. No noise, no fuss, just precision. Then, at exactly 11:59 p.m., I closed the laptop. Didn't need to see the lights go out. I'd built the dark. At 12:01 a.m., Haven blinked out of existence. No sirens, no red banners, just nothing. Where there had once been orchestration, now there was silence. The company's heartbeat skipped once, then stopped entirely. Like pulling the battery out of a pacemaker and tossing it into the desert. By 4:03 a.m., the first ripple surfaced. A fulfillment node in St. Louis flagged an error, routing directive null. Source sys undefined, which meant 800 refrigerated medical kits sat idle, waiting on instructions that would never come. By 4:47, a second node, this one in Phoenix, timed out during hurricane aid routing prioritization. By 5:12, HQ's dashboard showed 3,982 queued orders. No logic left to triage them. By 6:00 DM, the fulfillment floor looked like NASA on launch day if the astronauts were already dead. Bright monitors, desperate typing, panic rising. They didn't understand the systems Haven had handled. Routing suppression escalation, now just ghosts in the machines. And if you're curious what happens when the system rebuilds this time with the right names in the commit log, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. The next chapter's already compiling. And in the corner of the break room, Madison was still sipping her oat milk latte, blissfully unaware a digital iceberg had just cut through her luxury ship of intentional synergy. I watched it all unfold from my couch, wearing a hoodie and sweatpants with a hole in the knee, eating instant mashed potatoes straight from the pot, logged in through a Sandbox account I spun up during the pandemic, unlisted, undocumented, deliberately forgotten. Haven was offline, but its mirrored logs were still feeding data into the passive monitoring system I'd left running. Breadcrumbs, warnings, fail-safes. One by one, the alarms tripped. Forecasting, loop null. Fallback routines undefined. Overnight logs, runtime errors with blanks I'd intentionally coded. At 7:32 a.m., Madison finally noticed the smoke, called an emergency stand-up, stormed into the bullpen like General Mac culture. Her first question, why isn't this fixed? Her second, who still has access to Carol's code. By 8:15, someone resurrected the last Haven build, 14 months old. Covered 40% of infrastructure barely. They tried rerouting it through a hybrid Kubernetes mesh. It failed authentication. The cert key expired 6 days ago. I made sure no one noticed. Not the kind of person who installed the certs. Then it happened. Madison fired off a Slack message to the entire department. Bold font, red exclamation mark. The digital equivalent of screaming into a bullhorn. Carol left the company without proper documentation and failed to inform anyone about critical redundancies. We are doing everything we can to rebuild her system from available notes. Appreciate your patience. The comment thread beneath it, a masterclass in passive-aggressive blame theater. Wasn't there a backup? Wait, who was her backup? Didn't she flag this last year? Undocumented. That sounds like a leadership issue. I closed the laptop halfway down the thread. I'd seen enough. The company was drowning, and Madison had just thrown me under the bus trying to keep her hair dry. Let her. Let them. because none of them realized yet the real damage wasn't 4,000 lost orders or the fact that HR now had to cold call vendors like it was 1996. No, the real bomb was already midair, and no one had looked up. At 9:12 a.m. Eastern Time, the board's collective blood pressure spiked like a faulty defibrillator. It started quietly, just a report. Red flagged. Subject line, urgent system integrity exception. Initiated by user absence. Most of them didn't even know what Haven was. They thought it was just some internal ops tool the COO liked to name drop at investor dinners. But when a system report bypasses the executive chain and lands directly in the inboxes of the money men, it doesn't stay invisible for long. They expected graphs, a simple outage chart, maybe a log of missed deliveries. What they got instead was a single item, buried halfway through page 2, highlighted in soft gray, time-stamped, and marked override, $1,234,000 compliance exception. Manually cleared code, Glenna T4A auth ID CCO timestamp, June 12th, 8/17 code gray. The kind of internal flag that attracts outside counsel clawbacks and headlines. The override had been executed by the CFO, signed off by the COO, and the kicker. The timestamp matched exactly with Madison's first company-wide welcome speech. Same day, same hour, same minute she was up in the atrium smiling over jazz flute and catered acai bowls. And here's what still makes me grin in my sleep. Haven didn't just log the override. It logged who ignored the system's built-in escalation protocol. They buried it, overrode the compliance pipeline, scrubbed the flag from the dashboard, and labeled it handled internal. Except Haven didn't forget. Haven doesn't forget anything. I programmed it to clone every red flag snapshot and bury it in cold memory encrypted, time-stamped, and dormant until one thing happened. My credentials were erased. Only then would Haven trigger what I called the dead letter delivery. Sealed, signed, authenticated by Haven's own hash-verified protocol. By 10:05 a.m., the board was in full emergency session. The CEO skipped his keynote. General counsel started dialing outside legal. Investor relations pinged with urgent clarification needed requests. And somewhere between the panic and the finger-pointing, someone finally asked the one question they should have asked months ago. Why are we only hearing about this now? They didn't know. They didn't know Haven's silence had always been conditional, that the system only stayed quiet as long as the people steering the ship played by the rules. The moment I was erased without key rotation, without protocol, Haven told the truth. And its truth had claws. This was never about 4,000 missed orders. That was just smoke. I needed the sprinkler system to wake up. The real fire was the rot buried deep inside the organization. The language, the maneuvering, the way HR buzzwords had become weapons to purge those who asked the wrong questions. They wagged fingers at communication style while letting executives override financial compliance protocols. Let them explain it now. Let them justify hiring a pastel-suited HR director to rebrand the company as a sanctuary of trust while clearing a $1.2 million compliance breach under code Glenna T4A. Let them realize. The quiet woman they sidelined, the one who didn't smile at mixers or put glitter quotes on her cubicle, built a system that could whisper their sins to the board from beyond the firewall. Grim satisfaction doesn't cover it. It was mechanical vengeance, surgical. And I didn't lift a damn finger. By noon, the building reeked of panic and day-old smoothies. The board moved fast. By 1 p.m., both the CFO and COO were suspended pending internal investigation corporate speak for already gone. Their badges stopped working before lunch. Legal requested override logs from the past 18 months. And suddenly, IT compliance, once 2 forgotten engineers, and a dusty rack server was the hottest room in the building. Then someone leaked it, probably a board assistant. Or maybe a tired engineer finally done playing nice. Might have been a bitter junior dev, finally done with the smoothie bars and buzzword bingo. Might have been a board assistant who found a conscience. Doesn't matter. What mattered was the headline. 1.2 years compliance breach at Haven Core. Internal system flags. Execs audit leak spreads first. It hit Tech Pulse, then CNBC. By the time it landed on Reddit, it had its own meme thread. Within 2 hours, our biggest client, a global health logistics firm, froze every contract, issued a polished but pointed statement about reevaluating third-party compliance standards. Translation: they were jumping ship before the sharks caught blood. Client success managers started getting emails with phrases like fiduciary exposure and awaiting Q4 integrity clarification. Procurement teams panicked. Legal basically moved into the war room. Suddenly, VPs who hadn't opened a command line in 6 years were demanding system diagrams and explain it like I'm 5 sessions. Haven still offline, still silent. Its dashboard, once symphonic, was now an empty husk. Then came Madison's turn under the blade. An emergency executive review was scheduled for that afternoon. No mood lighting, no fruit platters. This one had teeth. She walked into the boardroom like she just lost a pageant hair pulled too tight, eyes glazed with panic lips, frozen in a Stepford smile. The kind of look people wear when they realize they picked the wrong hill to die on. They grilled her. Why weren't there redundancy protocols? Why did a single architect control a mission-critical system? Why weren't compliance flags independently audited? Why was there no knowledge transfer during offboarding? She tried to pin it on me, claimed I had been uncooperative, withheld documentation, labeled me hostile to team culture. Then someone from the board lifted a printed email. Subject line: re-audit, handling, flow urgent. Time-stamped. 6 months prior. From me. Unanswered. Madison stammered. Said she'd missed it. That she'd been onboarding. That it wasn't her job. But it was too late. The board had more receipts than a CVS aisle. And me? I shut down the last alert. Wiped the burner dev account. Dissolved Haven's mirrored clones into the void. Closed the encrypted tunnel I'd been watching through. Deleted the 6:01 a.m. system health script. That chapter gone. Like scaffolding stripped away after the real structure had survived the fire. And no, I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. I wasn't even smug. I was just done. Closed the laptop and stared out the window as a late summer thunderstorm rolled across the Arizona sky. Big rolling clouds gray as steel, swollen with electricity. The kind of sky that lets you know something is either ending or just beginning. Let them handle the cleanup. Let Madison white-knuckle her way through postmortems. Let the board sketch out their little float charts and flash acronyms like shields. I'd already done my part quietly, precisely with code, not chaos. I didn't burn the house down. I just removed the wiring and watched them light the match. They found the note 2 days later. It was buried in the metadata of Haven's shutdown report. A non-indexed attachment encrypted, time-stamped down to the millisecond with my old credentials. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a simple 3-paragraph memo I'd written 6 months before Madison ever stepped foot in the building. The subject line: potential audit suppression pattern, request for review inside. I flagged an override connected to vendor payouts tagged under the internal code gray. I'd CC'd the general compliance inbox. I'd even sent it to 2 board members I knew had some technical literacy. They never responded. No read receipts, no bounce backs, just silence. Back then, I still believed the system could fix itself. That if you flagged it clearly, if you used the right words, someone in power would do the right thing. I hadn't built Haven to expose people. It was meant to protect integrity, to support the ones trying to keep things running straight. But silence breeds rot. So the day I knew I was being erased, I embedded that memo into Haven's final shutdown sequence. This wasn't just a blackout. It was a confession booth with a tripwire. The report didn't just list the compliance breach. It listed everything. The dismissed alerts, the bypassed warnings, the access logs showing exactly who saw what and ignored it. Right at the bottom, in a section labeled Architect Statement, was my note. Digitally signed, immutable. A whisper that detonated like a gunshot. When the board read it, they went still. Not just quiet. That special kind of silence right before someone gets fired or subpoenaed. Because in that moment, they realized I hadn't abandoned my post. I'd been pushed. And the ones who pushed me knew exactly what they were covering up. And now they were staring at something unshakable. Not a vendetta, a receipt, stamped, sealed, immutable. Not born from revenge, but from preparation. I never wanted war. I didn't even want justice. I just wanted anyone, to listen when it mattered. When they didn't, I made damn sure the silence wouldn't last forever. The report wasn't rebellion. It was resurrection. Of the facts. Of the warnings. Of my name. Let them say what they want now. Call me cold. Call me difficult. Call me obsolete. But they can't say I didn't try. They can't say I wasn't right. And they damn sure can't say I was ever negligent. Bittersweet doesn't cover it. I built a system that ran silently faithfully without glory or gratitude. And when I was cornered, it did the one thing no empathy workshop or culture deck could ever prepare them for. It told the truth. And the truth didn't need applause. Just a timestamp. The call came just after sunrise. I was on the back patio of my sister's cabin nursing diner-grade coffee, watching fog roll off a lake that didn't care about boardroom fallout or slack-thread blame games. Block number. I almost let it die. Almost. Curiosity is a hell of a drug. I answered. Said nothing. Carol Madison's voice cracked like drywall raw frantic. I know things got complicated, but you need to come in. Legal's talking federal. We need your help fixing this. Her voice trembled. This is bigger than you. We were a team. I looked out across the water. Calm. Still. Cruel in its indifference. No, I said finally. We weren't. We were never a team. And I hung up. No dramatics. No curtain call. She didn't call back. An hour later, Jess, one of the few colleagues I still respected, texted me a screenshot. Internal memo leaked company-wide. Subject, immediate leadership restructure. Full internal audit underway, beneath it. 3 executive names. Stepping away to focus on family. HR now under interim legal oversight. Haven system logs to be forensically reviewed by an external firm. No mention of me, not directly, but they knew. Everyone knew. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted better than it had in months. By noon, another image went viral on company Slack before the mods deleted it. A blurry photo snapped by someone in facilities. Madison, walking past the bullpen. Alone, hair unbrushed. That signature Stepford smile cracked wide and flickering. Her arms were full binders, a framed Lead with Heart poster, and a sad-looking plastic plant sticking out of a box labeled Wellness Assets. Behind her, the facilities guy was peeling down the last pieces of her culture wall, the one plastered with pastel hashtags and glitter quotes. The adhesive didn't come off clean. Now, the wall was streaked and bruised just like the company. No one looked up as she passed. Desks were either empty or silently occupied by people pretending to be buried in spreadsheets. She tried to rewrite the company's DNA with smoothies and slogans. But she forgot who built the spine. And what happens when you cut it loose? The postcard came that afternoon, tucked between junk mail and a flyer for tire rotations, hand-addressed in blue ink, edges worn, a relic from a better timeline. On the front, a photo of our old office building, glass, glowing lights on like it was still a cathedral of innovation. But I knew what the inside looked like. Now? Empty cubicles, dead monitors, HR issue beige, desperately covering burn marks. I turned the card over. The handwriting was familiar, shaky but sincere. Hey, Carol, I don't know if you still check this address, but I had to say thank you. You probably don't remember, but during my internship, you told me real systems don't need applause. They just need to not fail. I never forgot that. The board reached out, asked me to rebuild, Haven 2.0 or whatever they end up calling it. I said yes. On one condition, your name stays in the commit log. First line. Always. Dev. I sat down on the porch steps, sun warming my knees. Read it twice, then once more. And I smiled. Small, quiet, real, legacy intact. I didn't reply, didn't forward it, didn't archive it with nostalgia, just slid it into a drawer next to a thumb drive labeled Haven, Final Build, Cold Archive. Zip, no interviews, no LinkedIn victory lap, just silence and peace. No smug tell-all Medium post. That's not how I build things, and it's not how I end them. I didn't torch the place, didn't kick over a server rack or shout my truth in all hands. I just turned off the lights and let the shadows dance until someone realized they couldn't see without me. In the final board audit report buried between procedural summaries and carefully redacted internal memos, there was one line they didn't touch. Couldn't, plain, unstyled, uncensored, system shutdown triggered by absence of architect. Let them sit with that. I already had. The truth didn't need press coverage. It didn't need a podcast appearance or a TEDx talk about silent systems and overlooked women in tech. It just needed to be undeniable. And now it is. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for watching, for hearing the part of the story most people overlook. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a fit. I just built something that worked. And when I was pushed out, I let the silence speak for me. If any part of that resonated with you, leave me a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you've ever been in a room where your work was essential, but your presence was treated as optional. Because I promise you, you're not alone. And if you've ever felt erased, underestimated, or quietly replaced, don't just get bitter. Get ready. Preparation isn't drama. It's strategy. Whether it's your system, your role, or your name, protect it like it matters, because it does. Hit that subscribe button if you believe quiet people deserve loud support. Share this if you've ever watched someone like me get written out of the story only to write their own ending anyway. Because this isn't just my story. It might be yours too. And trust me, the system always remembers who built it. Carol.